life truly began on New Year's Eve. Not the one with champagne and laughter, but the one where my old life crashed and died in a frozen ditch. I was 8 years old. My family was driving through a wild, ancient forest to reach a remote cabin for the holidays. The road was a sheet of black ice, the night an impenetrable wall. I remember my father's shout, the violent spin, the world turning upside down in a scream of tearing metal. Then silence. I awoke to a tomb of shattered glass and cold steel. My parents were gone, not just dead, but absent. The car doors were ripped open from the outside. In my child's mind, I thought they had crawled out to get help. I stumbled from the wreck, calling their names into the suffocating darkness of the pines. Only my own echo answered, followed by the creak of branches and whispers I couldn't quite understand. The first nights were a blur of pure terror. I huddled under roots, the forest's sounds morphing into monstrous growls and weeping voices. I was starving, freezing, and utterly lost. Then they found me. They were the wild people of the forest. Their faces were painted with clay and ash, their eyes holding a feral intelligence. They moved without sound. They took me in, not with words, but with gentle hands and shared warmth. They became my new family. I learned to move like a shadow, to understand the language of the wind in the branches, to see in the dark. The memory of my old life, my mother's perfume, my father's laugh, faded like a dream. Years passed. The forest was my home, its rhythms my heartbeat. Then on another biting New Year's Eve, the past found its way back in. A group of hikers, loud and bright in their technical gear, blundered into our sacred part of the woods. Among them was a woman. Her face, lined with age and sorrow, sparked a memory so deep it was physical pain. She was talking to her companions, her voice carrying on the still air. Every year I come back. My daughter disappeared here. The car was found, but she was just gone. They said animals, but I never believed it. I knew, with a certainty that stole my breath, I knew she was my mother. The lost daughter she spoke of was me, a wave of longing for warmth, for electric light, for a world without constant watchfulness, nearly pulled me from the trees. As I took a step towards that ghost of my past, a strong hand gripped my arm. It was Arvid, the leader who had first carried me to safety all those years ago. His kind eyes, which had always held a secret sadness, now bore the full weight of a terrible truth. "No, child," he whispered, his voice like rustling leaves. "Come, you must see." He led me deep into a gully choked with thorns and years of fallen needles. There, almost swallowed by the earth, were the rusted remains of our family car. It was not as I remembered. "We found you here," Arvid said, his gaze fixed on the wreck. "You were the only one in the car. Your family, they were taken before we arrived, taken by the old hunger of this place." He pointed to the twisted metal around the driver's door. Not crumpled from the crash, but peeled outward in long, deep grooves. The same marks were on the roof. "We protect what is ours from it," he continued. "We saved you from the woods, but the woods must always be fed. Your life was the toll paid that night." I stood between two worlds, the truth unraveling me. The forest, my sanctuary and teacher, was also a monstrous living entity. My happy childhood among the wild people was built on the bones of my first family, a sacrifice I never knew was made. The sun dipped below the trees. In the distance, I could hear the hikers making camp, my mother's voice a siren call to a life that was never mine to reclaim. Arvid looked at me, waiting. The rules were clear. The forest had been patient. It had raised its payment. And as the first stars of the new year appeared in the cold sky, I understood my role. I was no longer the saved child. I was the keeper of the gate. I turned my back on the flicker of the hikers' campfire and melted into the shadows, my painted face set toward their camp. The forest was hungry again, and I had to go hunting. I never cared much about New Year's celebrations. To me, it was just another date on the calendar that people used to pretend their lives were about to change. That year, I was 27, recently divorced, and working a job I didn't like. I volunteered to work the night shift at a roadside motel because it paid extra and kept me away from the noise of parties and fireworks. The motel was located on a long, empty highway about 40 minutes outside the city. We usually got truck drivers, the occasional family passing through, and sometimes people who didn't want to be seen. On New Year's Eve, we were almost empty. Only 6 rooms were occupied, and most of the guests had checked in earlier that afternoon. By around 10:30 p.m., the highway traffic died down completely. No cars, no headlights, just darkness and the sound of wind hitting the building. I sat behind the front desk, scrolling on my phone, occasionally glancing at the security monitor. Everything looked normal. At 11:15, a man walked in. That alone wasn't strange, but something about him felt off immediately. He was wearing normal clothes, jeans, a dark jacket, nothing memorable. What stood out was his expression. He didn't look tired or drunk like most late-night guests. He looked focused, almost like he was there for a specific reason. He asked for a room for one night. I checked him in without any issue. He paid in cash and didn't make small talk. When I handed him the key, he paused and asked me what time midnight was. I remember thinking it was a strange question, but I answered anyway. He nodded, thanked me, and walked down the hallway toward his room. At around 11:45, the power flickered, just for a second. The lights dimmed and came back on. That sometimes happened during storms, so I didn't think much of it. At 11:58, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It said, "Make sure the doors are locked at midnight." I assumed it was spam or a wrong number. Still, I locked the front door out of habit. Guests could still enter with their room keys, but no one from outside could come in. At exactly midnight, there were no fireworks. That's what I noticed first. Every year, even out there, you could hear something in the distance. This time, there was nothing. No noise at all. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting. Then the security monitor glitched. One of the hallway cameras froze on a frame showing the man who had checked in earlier. He was standing outside his room facing the camera. He wasn't moving. He wasn't blinking. Just standing there. The timestamp on the screen read 12:00 a.m. I waited for the image to update. It didn't. I stood up and leaned closer to the monitor. That's when I realized something else. On the other hallway cameras, other guests were standing outside their rooms too. All of them. Different floors, different hallways, all facing the cameras, all completely still. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "If you see them standing, do not speak to them." I felt a cold sensation in my stomach. I checked the sender details, no contact name, no call history, just those messages. I tried calling the police. The call didn't go through. No ring, no error message, just silence. At 12:03, the man from earlier appeared in the lobby. I didn't hear him walk in. He was just suddenly there, standing in front of the desk. His expression hadn't changed. He asked me if I felt different yet. I asked him what he meant. He smiled slightly and said, "Then it worked." I told him he needed to go back to his room. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. He shook his head. He said, "People think the year changes for everyone at the same time. That's not how it works." I asked him to leave. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. He said, "Some people cross over. Some people get left behind." Then he turned and walked back down the hallway. At 12:05, the fire alarm went off. Not loudly, just the warning light. No sound. The system panel behind the desk showed alerts for movement in every hallway at once. On the cameras, the guests started walking. Not normally. Slowly, in sync. All of them moving toward the lobby. I locked myself in the office behind the front desk. I turned off the lights and watched the monitors. One by one, they reached the lobby doors and stopped. They stood there, facing the desk, just like they had faced the cameras. The man stepped forward. He looked directly into the camera and spoke. He said, "This place is full now." I don't remember passing out, but I must have. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight was coming through the lobby windows. My phone had signal again. There were missed calls from my manager. The motel was empty, no guests, no cars, no luggage. Every room was unlocked, every bed untouched, like no one had slept there at all. The registration records were gone, not deleted, just blank. The only thing left was the key from the man's room sitting on the front desk. I quit that job the same day. Every New Year's since then, I get a message at exactly midnight from an unknown number. It always says the same thing. Some years move forward, some don't. And no matter where I am, for a few seconds after midnight, everything goes completely silent. I worked as a night dispatcher for a private security company for just under 4 years. It wasn't a job anyone dreamed about, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it paid extra for holidays. I didn't have much of a social life, and I never liked crowds, so working New Year's Eve shifts became a habit. While everyone else was drinking and celebrating, I sat in a quiet office watching screens and answering radios. The office was in an industrial zone on the edge of the city. During the day, it was busy. Trucks, forklifts, workers coming and going. At night, especially on holidays, it felt abandoned. Just rows of dark warehouses, empty parking lots, and long stretches of road with no streetlights. Our building was small, reinforced concrete with no windows in the dispatch room. Once the door closed behind you, it felt like the outside world disappeared. On that New Year's Eve, I came in at 8 p.m. sharp. I remember checking the schedule and seeing I had 3 patrol units assigned. Daniel was covering a residential area near the outskirts. Mark was patrolling commercial properties closer to downtown. Luis had the industrial loop, which was usually the quietest route of all. Everything was normal at first. We exchanged routine check-ins. Weather was clear, no alarms, no incidents. I made coffee and settled into my chair, half watching the GPS screens, half scrolling on my phone. By around 10:30, something started to feel wrong, though I couldn't have explained it at the time. Calls slowed down more than usual. Not just fewer calls, almost none. That might sound like a good thing, but after doing that job long enough, you notice patterns. Silence isn't always calm, sometimes it's just waiting. At 11:12, Daniel radioed in. His voice sounded calm but tighter than usual. He said his patrol area felt strange. I asked him to explain. He said there were people outside, not partying, not walking dogs, just standing near their driveways or at the ends of streets. He said it reminded him of people waiting for a parade that never showed up. I told him maybe they were waiting for midnight fireworks. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he said it felt organized, like everyone knew where to stand. I told him to continue patrol and report anything specific. He acknowledged and signed off. At 11:40, Mark checked in. He said the commercial district was dead, no traffic at all. Even the highway ramps nearby were empty. He joked that it felt like the city had shut down early. Luis didn't check in at 11:45 like he normally did. I figured he forgot. It happened. At 11:50, Daniel's GPS icon stopped moving. It didn't vanish, it just froze in place. Signal loss was common in his area, so I made a note and didn't think much of it. At 11:58, my office phone stopped ringing completely. No incoming calls, no alarm notifications, nothing. My personal phone still had signal, internet still worked. Just no calls to dispatch. At exactly midnight, the lights flickered. Not a blackout, just a brief dimming. Enough to reset the microwave clock in the break room, but not enough to shut down the systems. That detail stuck with me because it didn't make sense. Power fluctuations usually hit everything or nothing. I radioed all units for a standard midnight check-in. Mark responded first. He said everything was quiet, but his tone had changed. Less joking, more serious. He said he hadn't seen a single person for over 20 minutes. No fireworks, no noise, no movement. Luis didn't respond. Daniel didn't respond. I called Daniel's work phone straight to voicemail. At 12:07, Daniel's GPS updated. His vehicle was no longer in his patrol zone. It showed him parked on a dead-end street that wasn't part of his route. I recognized the street name because we'd had complaints there before, old houses, mostly elderly residents. I called him again. This time he answered. He didn't speak. I could hear breathing, slow and steady, not panicked, almost controlled. I said his name and asked if he was okay. After several seconds, he spoke quietly. He said, "They didn't go inside." I asked who didn't go inside. He ignored the question and said, "They're all still outside." I asked him where he was. He said, "They're facing the same direction." I asked him to clarify. He said, "All of them, same way, like they're watching something." I told him to leave the area immediately and return to his patrol route. He paused, then said, "I don't think we're supposed to move." The line went dead. At 12:14, Luis's GPS froze. At 12:16, Mark stopped responding to radio calls. That's when I contacted the police. I explained that I had 3 guards not responding in abnormal GPS activity. The dispatcher sounded distracted. She told me they were overwhelmed with New Year incidents and would send someone when available. That didn't sit right with me. We should have been getting alarm calls if things were that busy. We weren't getting anything. At 12:20, Mark's GPS moved suddenly, not gradually. It jumped from one location to another several blocks away, as if his vehicle had been picked up and placed there. Then it stopped moving again. I tried calling emergency services again. This time the call connected, but no one spoke. I could hear voices in the background, many voices, overlapping, calm, almost conversational. Then the line disconnected. I checked social media, no new posts, no live videos, no countdown messages. It was like the city had collectively stopped talking. At 12:30, someone knocked on the office door. 3 slow knocks. That door required a badge. No one should have been able to get inside the building. I stayed silent. The knocking stopped. A few seconds later, the office phone rang. I answered without thinking. A man spoke calmly. His voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. He said, "You stayed behind." I asked who he was. He said, "Someone always does." I asked what was happening outside. He said, "The transition finished." I asked what transition. He replied, "The year." I told him my guards were missing. He said they went with it. I asked what it was. There was a pause, then he said, "Forward." The line went dead. I didn't leave my chair until morning. When daylight came, everything returned to normal. Traffic sounds, phone calls, alarm notifications, like a switch had been flipped back on. Police eventually found all 3 patrol vehicles, parked neatly, engines off, doors open, no signs of struggle, no guards. Official reports listed them as missing persons. Internally, we were told to stop discussing the incident. No explanations were given. I quit 2 weeks later. I don't work nights anymore. I don't stay awake on New Year's Eve. I turn off my phone and go to bed before midnight. Because last year, just after midnight, my phone buzzed once. No message, just a voicemail. It was Daniel's voice, and all he said was, "You were supposed to come too."